Where we are after this point, I refer to the day after the election as kind of probably the context for the conversation we're about to have. It's, in some respects, a different terrain, in some respects, a more subtle terrain. But I think it's a context that really has animated a lot of the collective work that we have in rural America. And I've never made it, but if you can visualize kind of like a really hallucinatory Venn diagram, this is kind of like the moment that I think we're in. On one level, like, we have increased visibility of rural American Indian country in the media. Like, at this point, there is like an AI generator for all the major newspapers to just write bizarre, unfactually true stories about rural places. But like, that's happening. And what's also occurring in that moment is that some folks are beginning to believe that that increased visibility is equating itself with greater support for rural projects. And we know that it's not. And that's the thing that we need to talk about. While that visibility is occurring, there's a lot of increased desire to find common ground. Common ground is a word that we hear a lot about, especially in a moment in rural communities where acts and expressions and sentiments of white supremacy are very prevalent in large ways, but also in subtle, commonplace ways in so many communities. This notion of common ground needs to mean more than just two words that we put together. It needs to be action. At that same time, we're seeing really expanded knowledge building resources, gatherings, summits. Like, there are opportunities like this for us to come together that weren't there 3 years ago. It's something to really celebrate. As there's also lots of programs, and I use this word outreach and I put it in quotations, we're seeing folks that are interested in rural that weren't interested before Tuesday, November 8th. And I think that's something that we should think about. As we all come together as a coalition, I think this last point is really worth thinking about, because the kind of coalition we can build together, if we wait long enough, someone else is going to build it. And it could be someone else from one of these support structures with the best of intentions, who may not be bringing in folks from rural America and Indian country and the rural-urban condition to help animate that and give it voice. But with that, I would really like to bring forward one of the finest and most vigorous supporters for our work in rural American Indian country, Jen Hughes, who is the Design and Creative Placemaking Director for the NEA. Jen, thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt, and it's great to be with you all here this afternoon as we close out our time together. And I just wanted to invoke what Jasmine shared earlier today about we're at this moment where history meets the future, and what we really want to do is to part our time here together with things that we will carry back to our work and ways that we will continue to stay networked and connected and really collectively move this field and body of work forward. So I'm really honored, and I'm going to just hop right to it, to be on stage with some brilliant thinkers who are going to share reflections and aspirations as we depart from our time together. So first we have Pourier from the First Peoples Fund. Next to her, Jamie Bennett from ArtPlace America, Whitney Kimball Co. from National Rural Assembly, and Pam Breaux from the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. So I'm just going to start lobbing questions at you, but I think, the thing that really is resonating with me, and certainly through the many conversations I've had over the last 2.5 days, is what is bringing you hope, and where have you really found energy in the conversations in terms of opportunity for this collective room to really move forward in our interim time before we all meet up again in Minnesota?
Where should we start?
Yeah, do you want to start with
You did that. All right.
Open floor.
Well, everyone seated here today is bringing me a lot of hope. So thanks for that. This is clearly a growing and an evolving cohort, field, and movement, right? And all of those are really important. This is a cohort that's building. I think new folks are coming into it all the time. It's evolving, and that's evidenced in so many conversations we've had over the past few days. There are some in the room who've been a part of the conversation for a few years, and some who are newer, doing great work from the place that you're from, and finding your way and your space as a member of this cohort. And so as the growth and the energy and the evolution continue, I think it'll be particularly important for the cohort to continue mapping itself out, really helping new folks come into the cohort in a way that they can understand their fit, right? How the work that they do at home fits into the broader cohort, and how the work they can do with the cohort can advance the field or be a part of advancing the field and the movement for all. But all of that brings me a great deal of energy.
Hi, I'm Whitney. I'm with the Center for Rural Strategies and the Rural Assembly, and I'm so honored to be up here and considered a brilliant thinker. That was outrageous. So I have hope in the 2020 election. So I'm very hopeful about that. I also have a lot of hope in the courage that I've seen displayed in the execution of this conference. Like, this was a really hard conference to pull off. We were on buses, we went to all these different places, we had dinner and lunch and breakfast with different kinds of partners all over the place. So many relationships had to be cared for and considered, and I give so much credit to Savannah and Matthew and to the working group and the executive committee and all the people who are here for being so courageous about showing up in this space. It was hard work, and we've all done it. And I think that having done it now, having practiced it, we can do it again, and we're just going to get better at it over time, right? And that's kind of the heart of the work we do anyway, is this showing up with courage and doing it better every time. So.
And I think what I'll share is that I started today the way I start many mornings by listening to Eartha Kitt as I was taking a shower. And there's a song she covered called Here's the Life. And there's a lyric in it that says, I've had my share, I've drank my fill, and even though I'm satisfied, I'm hungry still. And that notion of satisfied and hungry still is what I'm sitting with. And I think one of the problems that we often have in the world at large is we don't allow more than one thing to be true at the same time, right? It is possible to be satisfied and hungry. It is possible for our work to be urgent and to require patience. Yep. It is possible that rural America is just like urban America, and it's different. All of those things are true at the same time, and this room full of people, all of you I've experienced are people who can hold contradictions that are both true in the same space at the same time. And I have a colleague, I can't remember who it was, who talked about that moment after the 2016 election when the New York Times dispatched young people from Cobble Hill to breathlessly report back from rural America to their embubbled readers. And that notion of embubbled readers is something I've thought a lot about. And I have hope that we're piercing those bubbles. And I just thank you for all each of you have done to do that.
Thank you. What you just said about history and where history meets the future. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Where history meets the future. I was recalling a conversation we had with one of our fellows recently had with Don Montelo, one of our longtime mentors at First Peoples Fund. And one of the young folks pointed out to him that when they started this work, making a living from their art, that I started this work with First Peoples Fund like 20 years ago now. And Don at the time said, if you want to make a living from your art, then you got to move to Santa Fe. And so, looking at, for me, hope is seeing some of our relatives from home and Standing Rock and others in the room here today, and just to see that ripple effect of the good work that's happening in our region. Also thinking about the impact of resources you know, when they are gifted out to tribal communities. And, you know, outside of federal resources, you know, we're heavily dependent on philanthropy because we're still trying to navigate like what that whole donor thing means, you know, and how do you bring people into your circle. And, you know, so thinking about those, because I'm always about like data and really doing your research and, you know, carrying that. And so we see now the generation of young people from home 20 years later that have gone on maybe to Santa Fe, to the Institute of American Indian Arts, that are teaching in our tribal colleges now. 4 of our fellows are instructors at the Oglala Lakota College. And Gus Yellowhair is one of those. And he started out, you know, him and his daughter, you heard their story the other day, you know, about getting their first loan through the Lakota funds. So when I started this work, Lakota Funds was the first microloan fund in this country. The first microloan fund in this country. We didn't have any banks on our res. We have our first ever Lakota Federal Credit Union. So I think about footprint and the resources, and I just wanted to quickly share how important it also is to have Indigenous folks inside philanthropy, because I'm seeing that, you know, as a Native woman, the impact of when folks are inside philanthropy. And my dear friend Carly Badhartbull from the Bush Foundation, we've been talking a lot about data through Native Americans in Philanthropy and First Nations Development Institute and others. And you know, she talks about coding, and sometimes your coding may be reflective of saying it represents X amount to this community, X amount to that, and it doesn't, you know, when you kind of start to dig deep and you go back and follow through the grants. But, you know, just since 2013, in our region, when Bush Foundation started working with the 23 nation states and the fellowship programs, you know, they went from, in 1987, 30 years ago, 460K going to Indian country up to 6.7 million now. And then, and for us, that's a huge amount of resources, but that's 30 years, right? And then also thinking about others like the Northwest Area Foundation and, you know, acknowledging from the Board of Trustees level on to the staff is that, you know, they give 40% of their resources to Indian country, because that great railroad train just plowed across the Northwest right through, split North and South Dakota into these 2 different states now, right? That's why there's North and South Dakota, so the train could go through. They split it in half, right? And they split our whole territories. So, you know, just thinking about that, and then thinking about narrative. You know, we hear a lot about narrative change, but, you know, speaking of rural Black communities, tribal communities, you know, Kentucky, we're still not seen. You know, we know that in our history books through Reclaiming Native Truth with one of Crystal Echohawk and First Nations Development Institute, that our history is only shown 1900s back. So in our school books, you know, young people, we still get asked today, do you still live in teepees? All the way out to Washington, D.C. Because that's the history that's told. And that's the history that's told in Kentucky, that's the history that's told in this region. So there's a great resource I just want to share just quickly about hope, is Illuminative as part of the research with Reclaiming Native Truth. And so there's a movement out there of Indigenous folks, you know, really telling our story. And there's a whole range of data in here that a team of just wonderful folks, including Crystal Echohawk and First Nations Development Institute put together. So for those things, you know, it's about data, it's about research, it's about seeing, it's about trust. The Intercultural Leadership Institute that I'm involved with, NALOC, Native National Association of Latino Arts Organizations, Roots, Alternate Roots, First Peoples Fund, and PAI. It took us 10 years to just really begin to truly see, hear, and trust each other. So as we're thinking about this work going forward, we need to think about how we have assumptions of how we work with folks in our regions and our areas to, you know, just thinking about a call out to some of the regionals and the state arts councils. Please see us. We don't know where you're at, you know. or you might be too far from our region or how we see our territories. So I know some of you are doing, our South Dakota Arts Council now has Native board folks, Native members on the board and such, but we want to work together, you know. So I'm hopeful that, you know, all of the work of us coming together and really telling our own narrative, doing our own research, and owning our data, because we believe in Indian country is, you know, data is sovereignty. Plummy.
Really well said. I think the thing that's really sticking with me in this conversation is acknowledging where we really are and how far this field has evolved and come, because we're all together for these 3 remarkable days, but still leaving hungry. And so I guess a thought that would be really great, and Pam, I might go to you again first, because I know that NASA's really been thinking about some of those specific pathways to really advance the rural arts and culture work. And so if each of you might be able to share either resources, things that are happening, sort of specific nuggets that folks can carry from this room back to their homes, it'd be great to just hear some of those ideas.
So I'd like to share one resource, but sort of wrap a message around it. This is one of many messages I think any of us could provide for you today. But I'm hopeful that that you as a cohort, we as a cohort, never forget the political power you actually have to help accomplish your work at home. Right? It's not the only lens. It's not the only way that you will work to improve community, but it is a tool at your disposal, and rural communities really have that power. I've been, and that political power to grasp. It's there, and that's achievable. I've been in at least about 3 conversations this week with folks about that issue, about how you really begin to organize to ensure that you're leading the leaders in your states and at home, and that you're amassing and using the political power that you have, that you can have, to advance your work. So don't forget that power is at your disposal, and you can organize and bring it to good use. And I'd be happy to speak with anyone individually about some practical ways that can be started. But in terms of a tool, to this point, NASA has had, my organization, the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, NASA has had the privilege this past year of working with the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Governors Association to create a new tool specifically designed to help policymakers like governors and their teams and other policymakers see their role in advancing arts and rural development together. So this is a publication of the National Governors Association, and it provides a really, really practical framework for policymakers to take solid action. This is a guide that can be used by communities and by organizations to really engage in those conversations with policyholders and to encourage the kind of action on their part, the kind of leadership on their parts that will help you advance your work, right? So a lot of very practical strategies. It's oh look, someone's holding one up now. It's lovely. It showcases some of the inspirational, really productive work that's frankly going on in your communities. Some of your communities are showcased in it. There are projects from across the country that are embedded within it. We made a very specific intention to help governors and their teams see within it that there are models and really important programs happening within their own states that they need to notice, be aware of, and then take leadership surrounding support of the work. And so that's available online quite easily through the NEA, through the National Governors Association, through NASA. And just one word about how it's beginning to resonate with policymakers. We are on the phone and on email all the time now, really working to promote this guide, this rural action guide, and we're really seeing it resonate. One example of that resonance is with the Western Governors Association. They're really taking this so seriously that they're placing this guide and some thinking and work around it in the center of their conversations about how they're moving forward in the new year. That's going to be an opportunity for stakeholders, constituents, communities in the West, with the Western governors really placing this at the center of their initiative for the new year. So we're going to continue to pound the pavement, continue to promote it, and continue to also help communities get access to it as well. It's free, it's available. I think it's smart, and it's the tool you can use with your political power, along with your cohorts, your neighbors, the folks in your organizations, to really ensure that you're leading the leaders, right? You take the lead and show them where they need to follow to support the work you're doing.
So I'm going to be vulnerable with you for just a second and tell you that this week I've been so tired and feeling worn down, and it's really not just this week. Maybe it started last year. I mean, it's been a while that I've been feeling overwhelmed and tired, and almost like when you're on the plane and they tell you to put the mask on the person next to you first before you, or put it on yourself first before you put it. So what I've been doing is putting the mask on other. I think all of us are busy frantically putting the mask on all these things, and we need to take care of ourselves too. And in this last year, the Rural Assembly has had the good fortune of being able to hit the pause button a little bit and spend some time in discernment about what is most helpful right now in the field, or what can we do that would be helpful to our colleagues and friends and partners in the field. And if this gathering is any indication, I've had a number of conversations with many of you about how you are feeling tired and a little bit drained, and you need some energy and you need some nourishment. And so I've been thinking about how the Rural Assembly can help, perhaps with nourishment, in terms of connection. We're going to have two gatherings coming up: a Rural Women's Summit and a Youth Assembly. So the Rural Women's Summit will happen in October. At the end of October, it does not conflict with the arts and culture gathering. So go to that one, go home and take a nap, put the mask on yourself, and then come to the Rural Women's Summit. And then we're going to have a Youth Assembly in March for 18 to 25-year-olds who live on the border, it will be on the border, the Texas-Mexico border, and around McAllen, Texas. And it's for young people from all across the country. And the idea around those gatherings is to fuel us and feed us, and not necessarily put us in a space where we have to fix everything or fix broken systems, but where we can actually build one another up and nourish one another, and to go back out into the world and do the things that need to be done. The other thing I would put out there to you is that we're building a rural squad, and I really love the term squad. Squad is like, it will sell merch, I really think. So the idea behind the squad, the reason we're calling it a squad and not like some long leadership, have a big acronym, in part is because squad for me sounds like a group of loyal partners and friends who are building each other up and building the world up at the same time. And so this squad is in development right now, and all are welcome to share their thoughts about what would be most helpful to you if you were a squad member, if you were a member of this connected group of people who we're hoping we'll be able to put in front of or on national platforms connect with national media and help them tell the story of their work, their lives, their communities in ways that honor the authenticity of that, in ways that will strengthen them and not drain them. So that's something else that's in the works. So those three things, those two gatherings, the Rural Squad, and also just remember to be taking care of yourself as you go out there and hop around from conference to conference and community to community. You're doing really good work. But me being vulnerable up here with you right now, and honestly, I'm looking for nourishment. And thank you all for nourishing me this week.
Let me just share a little context and make a couple offers of resources. The context I'll share is that I hate white papers. And one of the reasons I hate white papers is that the World Bank did my favorite thing ever, and they commissioned a white paper about white papers. And this is true, you can look it up. And what they discovered is that 31% of the white papers on their own website had never been downloaded. 1 in 3 white papers published by the World Bank, not even the author's mother clicked the link. So one of the reasons I think this is I think we didn't learn an important lesson that we could have learned from the golden age of newspapers, which is you absolutely have to have a newsroom, right? You have to gather stories, you have to write them up well, you have to polish them. But you also need a circulation department, right? Back in the day, young boys, young girls literally would take those stories and throw them at your front door so you had to trip over them on your way out. And there are two things I just want to stand up about the NASA report that Pam mentioned, is that A, it's one of the best I've ever read, it's extraordinary, and 2, that pavement pounding that NASA is doing is what means that it's actually useful and getting it into the hands of people who are going to do things differently because they read it. So at ArtPlace, our colleague Jamie Hand, who leads our research strategies, has led investigations into 7 intersections, arts and culture with another sector. And in each of those cases, she's either identified or is in the process of identifying a set of partners who will help us do stuff. And one of the commitments that Jamie has made is that rural shows up significantly in each of those. So we did work around community safety, and we have a partner in LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. We've done work around the environment, and we've worked with both GRIST, the online magazine, and with the US Water Alliance. We just had a working group in Albany, Georgia around arts, culture, food, and agriculture, and we're in the process of identifying our partners. We've been working with the University of Florida on health, arts, culture, and health. We've been working with Enterprise and NeighborWorks to work around affordable housing and supportive housing. Just last week, we were in Pittsburgh thinking about immigration with a group called Welcoming America, and we've had some ongoing work. Welcoming America is awesome, yes? Yes. Are you from Welcoming America?
No, but I'm glad you're bringing up immigration.
Oh, excellent. Yes, no, welcoming, well, and just the thing, a quick footnote, Welcoming America is one of my favorite sort of mottos of an organization because they're intentionally working with communities that are along the welcoming spectrum, which means that they're working intentionally with communities that are not yet welcoming to newer residents because they want to move them along. So that commitment, I think, is really special. And then in transportation, we've been working with Transportation for America. The reason I read through that list is all of them have long been committed to working with partners in rural America. All of them have redoubled that commitment in their work with us. And if your work intersects with any of those sectors, and if you want to be connected with resources, with practitioners, with tools and resources, just email us, come find us, we can help make those connections. So that's what I'll speak into the room.
Okay. I just want to respond in a little different lens to this conversation and thinking about tribal communities, tribal governments, tribal nations, and our footprint within states and our direct relationship with, as sovereign nations, with the federal government. So I think the research, I was talking about research earlier, and just think about the research now around rural is, I would encourage you all to connect with the National Congress of American Indians and bring some of the research through there. And then also think about the relationship. You know, I'm a citizen of my tribe first. I'm a citizen of my nation. And then I'm a citizen of, you know, within the state of South Dakota. But we in the Great Plains area, you know, we're oftentimes in conflict with, you know, working with our state governments. And they don't often show up, the governors, to, you know, to hear us, you know, even oftentimes in crisis. So there's that contention there, and, you know, we have, I think, like I said earlier, first time Native folks on South Dakota Arts Commission, and then we have a contention with our governor, right? So my tribe just wrote a resolution to disinvite her out to our community, you know, to Oglala Lakota Nation. So I think in the research that we do and in rural is to, you know, again, just look at, you know, who's in your neighborhood, and, you know, encourage you to share that, knowing there's over 570 tribal nations in this country, you know, and like I said earlier, is that you have to see us and participate. And I know Gus and his daughter have invited everybody in the room to come visit Pine Ridge, you know, and they'd take you on a journey, and they'd charge you a fee too. So I just want to say that again with rural, because we're still not in those, you know, in that data, right? And I know National Congress of American Indians, oftentimes even with the CDFI funds, you know, the lending institutions, we're always measured up against mainstream, right? And then we're always off the radar, right? Because we're not even in that. Because we don't have the banks, or we don't have, you know, kind of we're not even in the measurements, I guess I could say. So, you know, just thinking about those things. Not to put down on the room.
No, I think that's important, and I'm glad you brought into the room research that is being done, because I think it's really important to us collectively to lean on the work and continue to build on that trajectory over time and continue to identify what's missing, so that we really acknowledge and root ourselves to lift that up as an issue and something we all collectively have the power to change. So I think that's really important. So I really appreciated, Lori, that you shared in the beginning sort of the trajectory of First Peoples Fund and sort of the trajectory of time. And I'm going to put this question out there just as a way for us to all imagine together where we might be. And instead of doing the really long view, I think I'm going to do something a little bit more immediate, unless you decide to change up the question. But I'd ask all of you, where do you collectively aspire to see all of us in 5 years from now? At the next Rural Generation Summit several years out in the future, what do you hope to be celebrating and acknowledging in terms of progress?
Maybe we'll have one in Indian country.
Lori, I'll co-sign that with you. I'll add my intention to yours for that to happen.
So I'm going to turn Jamie upside down and shake the leftover change from ArtPlace out his pocket.
So let's aspire, right? Let's really aspire. So in 5 years, perhaps 10, maybe let's cut it in half, 7.5, right? How about our country is defining rural America and tribal communities by what they have as opposed to what they don't have, right? Lord, it's time for that, right? I mean, look at the abundance we've experienced in the past couple of days, right? We've been defining Mississippi the last couple of days by what it has, right? And that's something this movement can do for our country, right? Is to really help in the redefining, right, of rural and tribal communities. What we've got, what the assets are, where the abundance is. A little bit closer to home, within this room, I'm hopeful that within 5 years, this movement has continued to evolve. We see more people in the room, indicative of the communities that could be in the room but aren't yet, right? Who's not in the room, and we need to add them to the mix. I think that in 5 years, I'd like to see this larger, more evolved cohort also come to some consensus, perhaps, or goal on some common goals for the collective, and some ways that as a collective we can really move the needle across the country for rural and tribal communities. So the evolution of this cohort, right, and this field, the building of this field, as well as this field's impact on how our country defines rural and tribal America. May as well, okay, going for it, big.
Yeah, I mean, let's go big, absolutely. In 5 years, let us not have 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 children living in poverty in rural America, or, let's, in 5 years, let us be working across boundaries and in relationship with communities in our region and also nationally, and have actual pathways for doing that well. I think about, so I'm an Episcopalian, and we have this prayer that we say every Sunday where we talk about things done and things left undone. And I've made a chore chart for my children of things done and things left undone in our house. And if I had a 5-year plan, I'd love to move all those magnets to the done column. And we've all got the done column in our minds about what needs to be done. So may all your magnets be moved from undone.
About 3 minutes left in our time here together. So I think there were lots of great things shared both during this panel, but also throughout the last 2.5 days. So if you wanted to share one quick tidbit reflection back out to the audience that people can sort of stick in their pocket, take with them to the airport, to the trains, to the cars, to their communities they're headed back, what would that be?
That takes me back to the exercise we did this morning in our homerooms, where we spent a few minutes thinking about commitment, and the traditional conference, we're overwhelmed, we hear lots of great ideas, and then we go home and suddenly we're buried, right? But the idea of lifting up one or a couple of real commitments to keep the work, something really tangible, something completely doable that you can just continue to advance, I think is one of the beauties of that exercise this morning. And so in that spirit, at NASA, what I will commit to do is being very explicit about keeping rural in our annual action plans. Our annual action plans is where, we can tick off that, 170 or so discrete projects, activities, et cetera, that our organization does every year. And so my commitment there is keeping rural very explicitly in it.
Are we making commitments or okay, all right. Yeah, you just set the bar, you just set the bar. No, I would just say, courage, dear hearts. Keep going.
And I've been sitting a lot with Brian Stevenson's notion of proximity, and I would just encourage all of us to take a step closer to the thing that scares or confounds us. Get a little bit closer, and do it while wearing squad merch.
I would say, we had a dinner with the Native folks last night, and we were just talking about how do we continue to connect our communities with some of the other communities, and so thinking about how we do that, and whether it's bringing a group of some of First Peoples Fund's Indigenous Arts Ecology grantees and some of the other folks engaged in the arts and within the tribal schools to other communities, just to share that other rural communities. So that's what I'm thinking about, how do we do that?
Can I add one more? Will you let me? Thanks. Okay. So, and this one's inspired by Brandy Carlton. I was grappling with something I didn't know I was grappling with until I heard her articulate it on that beautiful afternoon, day before yesterday, on the porch at the SIP Center. And she talked about readiness and whether or not the center was really ready for company, ready for a group yet, because she really wasn't at goal. And reconciling that, and it was just, it was just a huge aha for me, and a moment I'm so grateful that she provided to me, because it really helped me see that there are far too few places in my work life that I am truly appreciating and valuing the journey. I'm usually the person who, I solve problems for a living, right? I get to goal, meet objectives, straight line, often in an office or an agency, and to really step back, to realize that more often than I see, the journey and how you occupy the journey is every bit as important as goal, and there's so much beauty in that journey. And so, as Jamie mentioned earlier, the urgency and patience can occupy the same space. I'm hopeful that, as your hopes and dreams for your communities are enormous, I know, and you're working every day to get toward some brilliant goals, don't lose sight of the fact that the journey you're on every day with your neighbors, your colleagues, the people in the community who are working with you to improve community, all of that journey is just as important and just as valuable. So don't lose sight of that. And I think that also will serve to nourish us as we continue to get to those longer term goals. So the journey, don't forget.
Well, beautiful. Thank you so much. Again, Pam, Whitney, Jamie, Lori, for this fabulous conversation to round out our time. And I'm just going to ask the panelists to stay on stage for a moment. For those of you who have been sort of with Art of the Rural in working in this space over the last 5 years, when this momentum has really blossomed, I think it's really important for us to acknowledge, and I'm going to invite Chuck Fluharty to come down onto the stage. He is the true grandfather of this entire I'm really, truly indebted. You've been one of the most formative people in my career in really shaping and opening my understanding of the importance and role of arts and culture in rural America. And it will forever transform me personally and this country. So I just think it's really important that we sort of take ourselves back to be thankful for the origin of all this wonderful work. And you've taken incredible risks, but have been a stalwart and really pushing this message for a long time, and you should feel really proud looking out into this audience and what will blossom from our time here together.
And Chuck, hold on, before you get the microphone.
I'm not.
Hold on. Because there are two origin stories that I would just love to add about how we got to be in this room today. The first is really to the woman on my left and the woman sitting in the third row, that in many ways this gathering began on Facebook when two people were saying, why do we have to gather separately? Why can't we gather together? And so when Whitney and Ashley started dreaming on Facebook, they actually created this. So in many ways, thank you to the two of you. But so acknowledge that. But for me, this journey really began on October 12th, 2014, when I sat down to a not particularly good breakfast at the Voyager Inn in Reedsburg, Wisconsin, Sauk County. And I sat across the table from Matthew and Savannah and Teresa and Chuck. and we had a somewhat awkward conversation.
That's
and
for sure.
when we, right? And when we walked out of it, I walked out of it thinking I just sat down and had breakfast with a woodchuck whose hair is on fire. And Chuck let me know that he walked out of it saying it's another goddamn asshole city had come to mess things up. And that's how Chuck and I began a relationship that's 100% true, that's ended up in this beautiful moment on this beautiful Tougaloo campus. And I sit in a job that allows me to sit next to a giant bag of money. And it's shocking how many people have nice things to say to you when you're sitting next to a giant bag of money. But what's rare is to have someone who's willing to speak truth to you when you need to hear it. So I just want to add my thanks, Chuck, for speaking the truth when I need to hear it, and for telling all of us about the real wealth that exists in rural America. And so Matthew and Savannah and Donna and Jay got together with the folks from Worm Farm, and they'd like to commemorate a work of art from that moment that we met, which is an image of rural wealth. And so I'd love to present it.
And I was bitching the hell out of him earlier today, just so you know. Well, this is, you shouldn't have done this, and it's very humbling. And I just, when the Trump administration terminated our funding that had existed for 30 years and cost me my position and my dear loving friend and cohort Teresa to have to lose her job, it's amazing how quickly the phones quit calling when you lose your status, your wealth, and your resources. But it put me in touch with folks that have never had any for their entire life, and I've grown so much in my faith and my sense of gratitude for the journey. I would just say 2 or 3 things, which I mean sincerely. We've worked in all the sectors in public policy for 30 years with congressional support. We've never confronted a sector that is more critical to the future of God's creation and rural people than the arts and culture sector. If you saw the NPR poll this week with the Harvard School of Public Health, 1,500 people, 2% error, interviewed 1,500 rural citizens. 94% of rural people love their quality of life. 93% believe that they are in a place where others care about them, and 79% believe they are in a place which is totally safe. But the media didn't lead with those numbers. They led with the 3 negative numbers, which were 70% if they have to pay $1,000 will go bankrupt, and 45% believe they are underfunded and unemployed vis-a-vis their skill set, which is to say wealth is about rural people believing in the quality of the place and the people that they live there with, and how critical that is to the American democratic experience. I love Savannah's poem about the meadow. It is not just about GDP, but it's critical that we have GDP. So this old argument about is the arts instrumental or is it not? Hell yes, it's both. And I would just argue as we move forward as a community, to everyone on this stage is so important to me. Lori and Carlton are on our advisory board for our Cultural Wealth Lab, and I love them to death. The work that Appleshop and the center have done for years is critical. And Pam, what you are doing, if you have not got that document, take it to your elected members. There is a strategic strategy for the future of rural America in that document. If we do nothing else, we need to organize around that NGA document Those are the governors of our country saying, you are critical to them. I shouldn't be up here. This has been so energizing for me as a person, given what we went through. I love my son to death. When we were at Reedsburg for that conference and he and I spoke, I know I shocked the audience. I said, he's a pretty good guy, but he could never hit a curveball. He hit one this time. God bless you all.
And I think at this point, I'm going to invite Carlton back down to the stage so he can close us out.
Holding for Carlton.
Yeah, y'all ready? I'm ready to go home. Y'all should be ready to go home. You know, such a wonderful, wonderful past few days for the week. For those, how many of you have been here since Monday? These are the hardcore troopers. Look at them. These are the people you want to inspire not to be like, go home. Don't stay a week in a conference, double booking conferences. It's insane, it's crazy. Don't do that anymore. I don't know what I was thinking when Savannah and Matt brought this up. Like, yeah, we're gonna do a conference that starts the moment that the other conference ends, and we're gonna, I'm like, man, hindsight is 20/20. So lovely to have you all here. It's been really wonderful. I wanna say something about Matt and Savannah, and Adam and all of the ArtPlace people that, you know, this work is about community. And when you're coming to a place, if you're not engaging that community in the conversation about what's going to happen in that place, then it feels really hollow and empty. And I have to say that, you know, Matt and Savannah and Adam, you know, when they came and sat with us. They asked us what was appropriate to happen in this space. How could we honor the legacy of the people here and the spirit that you all are trying to invoke? And that wasn't just like a check the box type of thing. That was a constant check-in throughout the entire process that lasted all the way through to the final days. And I want to just really honor that process and that practice is something that made us feel welcome and made us feel that the spirit that we were living in and the things that we wanted to see happen that were important to us were also important to them. So thank you all to ArtPlace and to Art of the Rule for your deep listening and your, you know, just really responding to that work. Thank you. So I want to also, before we break out, just acknowledge John O'Neill, who is now in the ancestral realm, but came to Mississippi first as a worker for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, as a field secretary. He was here doing voter education work throughout Mississippi and was housed here on the campus of Tougaloo College. And he and Doris Derby and the other name is escaping me at the moment, Gilbert Moses, started on this campus the Free Southern Theater. And the Free Southern Theater became the cultural arm for the SNCC movement, the voter registration work that was happening. So when people tell you about the Free Southern Theater, know that it came from Mississippi. It went to New Orleans, Junebug, and eventually transformed into Junebug Productions, and is now managed by Stephanie McKee. But John was a dear mentor. He also was one of the founders of Alternate Roots. And so my life has been intertwined with his life for the last 18, 19 years of my life have been under his tutelage and really learning from him and recognizing the power of story and the importance of doing things with and with community versus for community. So I just want to honor that man and his legacy and the way that he continues to show up in our spaces and that this campus was where his artistic and cultural work really took it to the next level, grounded in the movement. So ashe to our ancestor Baba John O'Neill. So I'll end. I guess we're wrapping it up. This is it. So I would like to share a song, but it's a song that everybody should be singing, so we're going to sing it together. For those of you that didn't know it, it's State on Freedoms. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. We're going to leave you with that, and so I'll sing it, and if you already know it, join in, and if you don't know it, listen and then join in. We're going to sing it in 216-part harmony. So, are y'all ready? I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind